Hi, everyone. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs, and welcome to our show. This is the Sports Psychology Hour Facebook Live show. And I've been doing my radio show for 33 years, the last 23 years at Sports Radio 810 WHB here in Kansas City. My show's on live every Sunday morning from 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time. You can listen to it at 810WHB.com if you're online. And we've, over the past few years, in addition to our Sports Psychology Hour as a podcast, now via live stream, want you to visit my website, which is winnersunlimited.com. You can click on the podcast tab, listen to episodes of the show. We've got to several years of podcasts on there. And I'm doing a new series of conversations here focusing on coaches, athletes, health professionals. And today we're talking with Kevin Murat, who is a certified athletic trainer and works with athletes back in Stamford, Connecticut, and chiropractor as well. So you've got a bunch of degrees. We could name them all if you want. And love having you on the show. So thanks for joining me, Kevin. I'm looking forward to talking to you tonight.
No, thanks for having me. As you've mentioned earlier, I'm honored to be the last guest on the show. It's going to be an
just for this year, not forever, just for this year.
Right, for this year.
Yeah.
Yes, for 2024.
Yeah, our final show of the year. So tell us a little bit about what you do. Tell us, I work with a chiropractor here in Kansas City, Dr. Kevin Murat. He's been on my show. He just wrote a book on concussions, which we had him on a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. He's an expert. He's worked for, over 40 years with the Canadian Olympic team, the Kansas City Chiefs. He's in private practice here now. I go see him. He takes care of me all the time. People get misnomers about chiropractors, right? So share a little. Yeah, there's a smile, so we know. So share a little bit about that. And you're also an athletic trainer, so explain to people what you do.
Yeah, so I guess I get the vantage point of starting my career as an athletic trainer. So my perspective tends to be on the sports side first, and then I kind of branch out my viewpoint from there. But chiropractic does get a lot of interesting views just because it looks kind of violent sometimes with some of the techniques we do, and then there's some reports out there of how people feel about the treatments and all of those things. So of course everyone's going to have an opinion, and unfortunately you have some bad eggs out there, which you have in every profession, and not to say they're bad people, but some people are a little bit more versed to handle certain cases than others. And in my situation, I like to handle all athletes and anyone who I guess call them weekend warriors. And I especially work with a lot of baseball players. With just about 95, maybe 98% of the people I see are baseball players at this point.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I was one of the very first sports psychologists in baseball, one of the very first sports psychologists in the country in my 44th year of work. And in 1990, I got hired by the Royals as their full-time psychologist. I was there 1 year. They changed general managers. The new general manager didn't believe in it, so that was the end of me for the time being. But they rehired me again in 2008. But John Sherholtz hired me. He had a firm belief in the mental side and using people to help the players out. I mean, I got to be with Bo Jackson, George Brett, Tom Gordon, Brett Saberhagen, Willie Wilson, all these great athletes. Mm-hmm. And they, it took a while for them to open up for me, but quite frankly, they accepted me fairly quickly. And I'm such a big believer in mental health and treating athletes as a whole person. Yeah. And what you do fits into that whole diagram, that whole perspective. And just like for you as a chiropractor, a lot of people, that's a bunch of witchcraft and BS and all that stuff. And with me, it's the same thing. You don't need to shrink. I don't need to talk to somebody. Well, we've seen now, especially this summer with the Olympics, where mental health has gone to the forefront in discussions and all that. And I'm sure with baseball players, as I've been on so many different teams, and the trainers and physical therapists have to have some knowledge of psychology working with those athletes, because if not, you can't help them. Tell me your thoughts on that.
No, that's exactly right. Our common ground a lot of times is pain, right? Pain is an entire experience for the athlete. The provider helping that athlete work through that pain or discomfort it could be a tough task, mainly because it's such a multifactorial experience for the athlete. And because of that, the mental health is extremely important. So the way they view themselves and the way they view their experience is highly impactful with their prognosis moving forward. So if someone doesn't have a good perspective in the moment, or they're just not truly acknowledging the situation that they're in, it makes it difficult for all parties to help them move forward, to help them get back onto the field. And there are a lot of pressures, especially on every level, but especially on the pro level, that these athletes feel to get themselves back into the field and play at a high level. A lot of them have contracts that they have to play for, and if they're not ready by a certain time, if they don't have, or if they don't even have the certainty of a contract to come back and play for a certain team, that all impacts their experience with pain. And not to keep it about pain, but there are other pieces of the mental health that need to be taken care of to make sure the athlete's a complete athlete and can actually perform well.
Let's talk a little bit about baseball here, because
Yeah.
I've got pretty extensive background as a sports psychologist with major league and minor league players and college players, the whole range, and all the way down to the youth level.
Yep.
Both of my sons, who are now 35 and 33, played youth baseball. My oldest son ended up playing on a competitive team coached by Jeff Montgomery, who's the Royals all-time leader in saves, over 300 saves. He put together a team, and my son Jonathan played on it for 2 years. And Jeff was awesome the way he handled the kids. We played against teams where there's cheating going on, where all kinds of stuff, yelling, screaming. Jeff didn't do any of that. Baseball now has just come out today with information about injuries, and arm injuries in baseball are getting more and more common for younger and younger kids.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns I have, I think, when I worked with the University of Kansas in 1983 with the men's basketball team, Larry Brown was the coach. And Larry Brown told me a lot of things I remember, but the one thing that has stood out forever in a conversation I had with him in his office one day was about kids. And he said all kids should, in his opinion, should play a team sport and an individual sport. He said you get in a team sport because you learn about sharing and working together. Individually, work on self-confidence. And he said, I don't think anybody should play one sport year round till they're probably 13 or 14 years of age.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons he said, this is 41 years ago. He said, because of the injuries that happen.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that? And with youth baseball today, and the number of arm injuries, shoulder injuries we're seeing younger kids have because they're playing year round.
Right. And it could become a large problem. A lot of it has to be, are the athletes ready for the demands of the sport? You kind of mentioned it already, but early specialization in any one sport tends to be a little bit of an issue because you're not really getting the diverse movements that you can get in other sports. You mentioned even the team portions of it where you can kind of learn how to share in your success and share and the things that help you succeed as a team. As well as the individual aspect of it, and just understanding how to motivate yourself to do something pretty you know pretty powerful on the team, on your team, but for yourself. But on the injury side of things, early specialization, just you don't really get diverse forces being placed on your body. You don't really get the full athletic experience in terms of getting to use your feet more. You get a little bit of that in baseball, but it's a lot of force going through your body for a long time. So if you're not ready for the demands, which sometimes that tends to be, a lot of times it tends to be strength, and a lot of times that tends to be size of the athlete, so just pure mass of the body. And a lot of it just is, are you actually ready to throw as hard as you are? So unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, the sport has moved in a direction where a lot of scouts and recruits care a lot about velocity, because that athlete becomes very highly projectable to be a good player for them. And a lot of them tend to think, I can teach this athlete how to pitch. I can't really teach this athlete how to throw really hard. You either can do that or you can't. And that's not completely true, but I think you get my point early
Yeah.
on if you can identify that in an athlete. Um, the problem is as these younger athletes are chasing velo, they will have a lot of kids that are underweight throwing extremely hard, and I'll take the example of if we have a thrower that throws 90 miles an hour and he's 15, 16. That's very common these days. You have lefties doing that now. That used to be unheard of at one point. And now these guys are so concerned with that they spent all their time developing the skill to throw at that speed, but they never developed their bodies to be able to handle and absorb the forces to be able to throw at that speed. So that force has to get absorbed and has to go somewhere. So a lot of the forces go through the elbow, and over time, the elbow starts to hurt. Maybe they complain about it, maybe they don't. They continue to throw, and now we have elbow injuries that are commonly happening, starting usually at the growth plate level early on.
Well, you don't know this, but 2008, the Royals rehired me. I was there through until 2011, the end of the 2011 season for 4 years. And the pitchers that we had when I got there, all were struggling with their shoulders, and all of them had worn out their arms from pitching. A lot of them, we had a pitcher named Kyle Davies who was, I think, at 15 and 16, he was like the high school pitcher of the year in the country. And by the time Kyle was done, about 2012 or 13, his shoulder was basically shot because he'd been throwing, pitching so much. And what I'm seeing now is the pressure, like you said about the young kids throwing 90 miles an hour, the pressure to throw hard. And we're seeing a lot of kids in baseball playing year round. It is at younger and younger ages. Instead of switching and playing another sport or taking time off, they'll baseball here in Kansas City. It's done obviously for the year because it's winter, but they'll be going to indoor facilities and throwing and throwing and throwing. What's your opinion on that? And when should they take a break, or should they throw year round, or what? I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not an exact science. But what I like to use is the fact that there is a UCL tear epidemic happening here, across the league and across in every sport. To your point,
Tell everybody what that is, Kevin.
So UCL. So the UCL is a ligament on the inside of your elbow. It's the primary ligament that resists valgus force, and valgus force is just the force of your elbow kind of opening and prevents your elbow from basically tearing in that direction. The popular surgery that gets done to repair that or completely give you a new one is the Tommy John surgery, and just about a lot of athletes are getting that these days.
And sometimes twice.
And sometimes twice. And if you're very unlucky, it happens 3 times. So a lot of these are happening, and some of them have, I don't call it an expiration date, but if you're getting it fairly early in your career, especially as a pro athlete, there's a pretty big chance, and a lot of the surgeons are starting to understand that we're going to have to go in here again to do something to either repair it or give some kind of intervention to allow this player to continue to play.
Well, what's your thought? What's your thought on, or how old I guess kids should be where they can start throwing really hard? I mean, where's the and define what really hard is, but where's the point? And then when should they? When, from your perspective, how many months a year should they be doing that, and when should they take time off, and what should they be doing about that?
Yeah, so there's not an exact science. What I like to think about for a lot of our younger athletes, does your body have what it needs to understand or withstand the demands of the sport? So if you're someone who is 15, 16, and you're underweight, and at Advanced Therapy and Performance, where I work with, the owner, Josh Heenan, has a whole 90-mile-per-hour formula that we follow and we use as our check and balance to help us see if an athlete is prepared to actually throw and throw hard and often. Well, if you're underweight, then that's already an easy way to say, let's not throw year round. You're not necessarily built to do that right now. And sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow, but a lot of these kids are also trying to get recruited. So they'll go to a lot of these showcases, which some of these showcases are well into the winter months.
Right.
And it really doesn't make sense. And I don't want to, attack anybody out there that's doing that. But it to me,
Well, but tell us your opinion on it because I've got mine.
so my opinion as a healthcare provider, trying to keep guys out of pain during the winter months is not the time to be showcasing your talents. It's really the time you should be shutting down, or doing light throwing. It shouldn't be your time to be trying to wow scouts and do any of those things. And unfortunately, I think those baseball companies out there that's willingly doing that, I think they know that. And I think they're just
Well,
trying.
then let me ask this question. Then why do you think they promote the year-round throwing and not really taking time off?
Well, so it's a lot of money in baseball. So all of these showcases cost a lot of money. These camps cost a lot of money. There are a lot of people who are willing to pay that because they can see there's almost like this. It's like you can see what you need to do to be the player you need to be to potentially go to the school that you need to go to. A lot of them go to camps or they go to these club teams, and they have pro athletes or older athletes there that can literally tell them what they did to get to where they are. And they kind of just go for it, and then because of that, they don't stop. Now, part of it is a lot of them just really enjoy throwing, right? That's just a fun thing they love doing. They love throwing the ball as hard as they can. There's a true euphoria that some of them feel with this. The struggle is getting them to understand that to be able to throw hard and stay healthy, you've got to give it a break. At some point, you can't just do this year round. And in some areas, you can get away with doing that. In the Northeast, which I live in, I'm in Connecticut. It's easier to say, all right, it's 20 degrees outside. I don't feel like going outside and throwing this ball, so I'll stop and maybe play basketball or do something else during those months. And in the southern states or the warmer states, they can get away with throwing year round and not realize they're potentially doing something to their bodies that they potentially don't need to be doing right now. And a lot of
So,
them, it has to do with strength and size. Can I actually withstand the forces being placed on my body?
so when should an athlete, and we're talking about baseball here specifically,
Yep.
but when should a baseball player, young baseball player, be confident enough to say I've got to shut it down for a little while? What should be the warning signs or the I guess the issues that may come up that should make them realize, hey, I need to take a break?
Yeah, great question. So generally, it seems obvious when I'm saying it to myself and saying it to the athletes. But if you have elbow pain, it's time to get help. And if there's certain time of the year where you can get away with, all right, we're going to try to treat this thing and get you through this. Let's get to the playoff game. Let's get you to this camp in the summer months, and let's do this. But if you're at the end of the fall, oh, actually, if you're entering or finishing summer ball and you are finishing with elbow discomfort, elbow pain, that's one. And I'm specifically putting us at the end of the summer. I'll come back to this. You can't touch your toes, right? So these might sound a little unconventional, but stay with me. So you can't touch your toes. You have elbow pain. You can't really turn your head all the way. So if I'm turning my head, I get to maybe here, and I can't get that last bit. And imagine if you're a baseball player trying to look at the batter, trying to bat. You're trying to look over that shoulder and keep the shoulder closed as you throw, but you can't because you're tight rotating that way. So you just open up early, right? So now you're putting excess stress on your elbow. So that's three. And then, a lot of the other parts is just you're just severely underweight, right? So, and that's at the end of the month or end of the summer months that you have all these things that are there for you. And shoulder pain, you can kind of mix in there as well. You probably shouldn't go into the fall baseball season. Take that time to develop yourself, solve these issues, and then re-ramp back up and get yourself ready for the spring season. But a lot of guys, what ends up happening is they get sold the dream of the camp and the showcase and these recruiting processes, and they kind of go for it. Some people are in situations where they almost have no choice in a way because they're a junior or something going into their uh, junior baseball season, or they're in their senior year and they haven't committed anywhere and now they need to show something out there. But outside of those circumstances, pain is a wonderful alert system. Use it and listen to it.
Yeah, it's either a motivator or a barrier, depending on how you use it. Now,
Yeah.
let me ask this since our last few questions here.
Yep.
Where do the role of parents come in here? Okay, with all this, because you're doing you got you on that one. I could tell. So you're doing treatment with these athletes. How do you deal with the parents, and what do you see as some of the issues they have when they'll come in?
So a lot of them have. A lot of them are great. I'll start with saying that a lot of them have an understanding, like they don't know, right? A kid has pain, and maybe they think, oh, he just needs to suck it up sometimes, and he'll be okay. And then sometimes I have to be the one, or one of our providers have to tell them, like, hey, it is going to be okay, but there's no reason to push through this time. Let's actually work on these things, and then we'll circle back. He's not going to ruin any of his development. And that's the hard part, right? The parents are trying to get their kids into school. They're trying to get them the scholarships that they think are available to them. They're trying to get them to look good in front of certain coaches. But the parents have a large hand in this, right? They're the payers of all of this.
So how do you deal with them? I'd like to hear that, because that's,
Yeah.
I get clients in my office, and the first session, I always like to meet the parents first, get some information, and then we'll bring the athlete in. I meet with the parents and the athlete together and find out why are they coming to see me, what are their goals, what are their expectations, what are the issues, and then we develop a game plan for that. So how do you deal with parents when you've got an athlete comes in injury because they want them to get back out there playing?
Right. And it's all about being very truthful with them and saying, like, hey, I'm not trying to scare anybody into anything, but based off of these things, and I list them. If he continues to throw, we're not he's going to be less concerned about a recruiting coach trying to get him on the team if he's injured, right? And that injury could be something that takes a year recovery, right? So we're trying to avoid this situation happening. And you just lay it out and you tell them, the best way away from this is training, baseball specific training, of course, and to get them strong in certain positions. And you really just have to help them create buy-in in the process so that they're not so concerned with, hey, if I don't get him to this camp, he can't get into this college.
Have you ever had parents that will disagree with you and say you've got to fix him now? He's got to do, like you just said, he's got to get to this showcase or this camp soon. You've got to get him ready. Yeah, I'm sure you've had that before. So
Yeah, oh yeah,
I can tell.
so those are some of the parents where I have to sit them down a little bit more in depth. Sometimes I'll even carve out a healthy amount of time in my sessions to talk to them about that, and I have to make sure that the athlete is bought into what I'm saying as well, right? So if I'm telling the parent, like, hey, he can't do this, he can't do this, but the kid's in the background saying, like, no, I'm fine, I'm going to be able to do this. Everything I say in that session is kind of gets nullified when they go home and decide, let's just not go back to that facility. So I try to get the athlete to buy in, get the parents to buy in. And what I usually say to them is somewhere along the lines of, hey, we've got to do these things. Now, it sounds terrible, or else. But that tends to be what it is. You just tell them, hey, he won't perform well at this showcase. Right now, if I put a radar gun to him and tell him throw as hard as you can, he might not even want to, one, because it hurts. And two, his velo is going to be down 10 miles an hour. Is that what you want to show coaches? No, that's not what you want to showcase
Right.
to a coach. And they tend to. I haven't had issues having that conversation in a long time, purely because I can just show them. They join the session. I show them, hey, he can't even touch his toes. I tell them exactly why that is important in his mechanics. And I tell them why, if he can't do this, why that puts more stress on his elbow and why he currently has elbow pain. And I just walk them down that explanation enough so that they can see it quickly and they don't question that I don't know what I'm talking about, one. And two, it just helps them see like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was that bad, or I didn't realize that was even an issue. I mean, sometimes they don't even realize their kid's underweight to that degree. You know, the kid's 6'2", 16. They think, oh my God, my son's huge, but he's underweight. You know, if he weighs 140 at that size. Right.
Let me ask this question before we wrap things up. What
Sure.
would you say the biggest gratification you get from your work? What is it?
Biggest gratification. Wow, what a question. I honestly, when a kid has heard me speak maybe a couple of times, and he solves his own problem and he comes back to tell me about it and he shows his excitement about it, or him telling me he gained 2 pounds last week on his way to get to the goal weight of 180 or whatever it is. My gratification is seeing them become happy with what they're doing to get to accomplish their goal. That's probably one of my favorite things.
Well, that's great because that's my perspective too, and I think that's the thing. You know, you and I are in the business of helping whoever comes into your facility, my office, to get better.
Right.
And whatever getting better means for me, it's about psychologically balancing things out. For you, it's physically and psychologically balancing it out.
Yeah. Right.
Because you've got to get to understand your patients as people. And who they are before you can help them the best. Listen, Kevin, this has been fabulous having you on tonight. People want to get a hold of you. How can they reach you?
Well, they can find me at Dr. Kevin Murat on Instagram. You can also shoot me an email at kmurat, that's MURAT, at advancedtherapyandperformance.com. That's right there if you can read that. And that's probably the primary ways of mode of catching me.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been great. You've given some great information out there. I know a lot of people are going to benefit from it. I want to thank everybody for listening. You know, if you want to join my conversations, go to my website, winnersunlimited.com. You can click on the podcast tab to listen to episodes of the show. We've got several years of podcasts on there, and we've been doing this Facebook Live show now for over a year and a half. There are a lot of interviews on there. This is a great one we have tonight with Kevin. So do that, and I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. And you will see me again in 2025 after I turn 70 years old. So everybody have a good weekend and take care.
Happy birthday then.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks for being on with us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, take care.